Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a really fascinating, honestly kind of counterintuitive reality. We're looking at the two-income trap, why making more leaves you with less. So, why is it that modern dual-income households are often so much more financially stretched than single-income families from previous generations? It doesn't seem to make sense, right? Well, let's get right into it.
To really understand this, picture a typical modern couple. Let's say she's a nurse and he works in project management. Together, they're pulling in $128,000 a year. Now, looking at the data, that combined income puts them firmly in the top 25% of all American households. And here's the thing, they aren't living wildly beyond their means. They drive older cars, they actually pack their lunches for work this week, and they've got their kids in daycare. By every standard measure we have, these are responsible people doing exactly what society told them to. Yet, despite doing everything right, they are living completely paycheck to paycheck.
Then, life happens. Just last month, their furnace broke. The joys of home ownership, right? It's a totally routine $900 repair. But guess what they had to do? They had to put it on a credit card. Why? Because despite making $128,000 a year, there was literally zero cash left over to cover it. That specific moment, putting a relatively small repair on a card when you're technically a high earner, is exactly what we are unpacking today. And I promise you, it really isn't about buying too many lattes. There's actually something structurally broken going on here.
To grasp how we got here, it's super fascinating to look back at what life looked like before this dynamic took hold. Think back to 1970. The typical middle-class family usually had one primary earner, and that single income, it was genuinely enough. They covered housing, cars, healthcare, food, and still had money left over. But here's the absolutely critical part. The stay-at-home parent wasn't just managing the household. Financially speaking, they were an unactivated safety net. It's like they were sitting on the bench, ready to jump into the game. If the breadwinner got sick or laid off, the backup plan was that the second parent could enter the workforce. Fast forward to today, and female workforce participation has climbed to over 57%. Both parents are out on the field playing all the time. The emergency backup plan became the everyday operating standard, leaving that bench completely empty.
This shifting dynamic brings us to what researchers call the two-income trap. The definition is pretty straightforward. It's when a system quietly absorbs both household incomes just to cover essential expenses, leaving literally zero financial margin for emergencies. When you dig into the research on this, there's a fascinating 2003 study by Elizabeth Warren and her daughter Amelia that examined over 2,000 families who filed for bankruptcy. And what they found is truly surprising. You'd probably expect bankruptcy courts to be filled with irresponsible spenders, but the data actually showed that dual-income families were meaningfully more likely to go bankrupt than single-income families. Both parents were working, both were bringing home paychecks, but they had absolutely no margin left. Okay, let's dive into this because the psychological core of this trap is actually quite amazing. Most couples look at their massive combined gross income and base all their long-term decisions on that big, exciting number. But once you start looking at where the second income actually goes, based on actual net take-home pay, you quickly realize how incredibly fast it disappears.
Let's map out the math on a hypothetical $55,000 second income. It's actually shocking to see it broken down. First up, taxes. Notice how the second income doesn't start at the bottom tax bracket. No, it stacks directly on top of the first income, getting taxed immediately at the household's highest marginal rate. So, right off the bat, after taxes, that $55,000 shrinks to roughly $37,500. Next, we have childcare. For just one kid, the national average is about $15,000 a year for daycare. Ouch. Now you're down to $22,500. Then you have to factor in the second car required for that second commute, which is conservatively about $8,500 a year. Finally, there's what we like to call exhaustion spending. You know the feeling. When two parents work all day, sit in traffic, and get home completely cooked, nobody's cooking a meal from scratch. You order takeout, or maybe you pay someone to clean the house because you only have Saturday to actually spend with your kids. That exhaustion spending easily eats up another $7,500.
So, the crucial point is, after you subtract all those fixed and hidden costs required simply to hold down that second job, the household is netting roughly $6,500 for the entire year. Take a second to let that sink in. If you break that down, it's roughly $3 an hour. Someone is waking up early, sitting in traffic, working a full day, picking up the kids, and collapsing on the couch, all for $3 an hour in actual net gain. And remember, that math assumes you only have one child. Add a second kid into daycare, and that $6,500 easily drops right to zero.
But the most insidious piece of this whole trap is housing. As dual-income households became the norm, families suddenly had significantly more purchasing power.
So, what did they do? They competed for houses, specifically in desirable neighborhoods with good public schools, which drove prices way, way up. To put that in perspective, median home prices have more than doubled relative to inflation since 1970. When everyone in the market has two incomes become the bare minimum requirement just to cover essential expenses like a mortgage in a safe neighborhood. It essentially became an arms race where everyone escalated, but nobody actually won.
And this leads us directly to the ultimate mechanism of the trap. The exact moment you sign a 30-year mortgage based on two incomes, the trap snaps shut. You have now locked in a fixed structural cost that absolutely requires both of those paychecks every single month without exception. You can no longer downshift. If a child is born or a parent gets sick, one partner cannot easily take a year off. The house simply demands both incomes indefinitely.
This creates a highly fragile financial state across the country. In fact, an impartial 2019 Federal Reserve study found that 40% of American adults could not cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing money or selling something. Really think about that. And many of those are dual-income households who look perfectly fine from the outside. Their entire cost structure relies on the assumption that both incomes will flow in perfectly forever, with absolutely nothing going wrong. So when a normal life event hits, like our couple's $900 furnace repair we talked about earlier, there's no lever left to pull. Both incomes are already spent before the direct deposit even hits their account.
So, what do we actually do with all this information? Now, if you are sitting there realizing you might be in this exact situation, take a breath. The goal here isn't guilt or income shaming. It's about being completely honest about your current financial structure and making a deliberate, strategic decision about how to rebuild it. You have to design an escape route from a cost structure that demands absolute perfection.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how to break free. You need to rethink your household building blocks. The primary earner's salary should act as your single foundation income. That one income must be structured to cover 100% of your fixed, non-negotiable costs and essential expenses. So that's your mortgage, your cars, and your groceries. The second earner's salary then acts as the skyscraper income. This entire second income is completely uncoupled from your baseline survival. Instead of disappearing into elevated lifestyle costs, it is channeled directly into building wealth, security, and options.
Actually implementing this requires real, tangible steps. Step 1 is structuring your fixed costs strictly on income 1. Step 2 is allocating income 2 purely to emergency funds, maximizing your retirement accounts and taxable investments. And step 3 is the ultimate payoff, using that money to buy back what we can playfully call freedom units. Now, executing this might mean genuine sacrifice. It might mean buying a cheaper house and facing real social pressure as you drive past homes you could technically afford. But every single dollar you save by doing this is buying back options. The option to slow down, weather a medical crisis without panicking, or even change careers.
Ultimately, what you are trying to maximize here is the freedom gap. It's the critical, life-changing distance between the total amount of money your household earns and the bare minimum amount needed to strictly survive.
Most two-income families have accidentally closed this gap completely. They essentially traded flexibility for the appearance of being prosperous. But real security isn't just having two paychecks coming in, it's having the cash flow and the margin to handle what you couldn't plan for. The families that come out ahead financially over the long run aren't always the highest earners. They're the ones who intentionally keep their options open. So I'll leave you with this to ask yourself. Instead of constantly figuring out how to earn more just to keep up, how can you build a life where you purposefully survive on less to gain so much more in actual financial security and freedom? Thank you so much for walking through this explainer with me. Take a look at your own foundation, widen your freedom gap, and start building real resilience today.